Good afternoon to all of you. And this is a very burning need to understand the aspect and the subject matter which has been assigned to me to discuss with you all. And in next 60 minutes, me and my co-author and co-speaker, learned Shri Shailendra Saxena sir, will strive and try to brief the issues and the resolutions for the same. And in case if you have any queries, you may please ask at the end. And if it is relevant much, then in that case, you may ask the query while in the session itself. So with this, without taking much time, we should start this. Let me tell you, the scope of the discussion will, of course, not be inclined towards discussion table by table analysis, looking the time limit. And we all understand that now, we have already furnished 5 GST annual returns, GST 9 and 9C. So this is the 6th year. So looking all the circumstances and the time limitation, will go for the issues and resolutions directly. So in first 5 minutes, we'll give a few basic background and then we'll go to the subject matter. So before going through this, we are very, we feel very gratitude towards Taxmann who has given the opportunity to write the book on the same subject matter. And this is the 6th edition, which is just published. So at the request of Taxmann, we have included this slide also that, this book comprises of a detailed analysis and everything which we are going to discuss today is also covered in detail over there. So this is the scope which we have to discuss. Will take very few minutes for the basic discussion. As we all know that GSTR 9 and 9C is the requirement of section 44 to be read with rule 80. And for financial year 2022-23, the annual return is required to be furnished on or before 31st December. But the very first point is that what is the applicability? Let me tell you, after omission of section 35 subsection 5, which was there for audit to be conducted by practicing chartered accountant or cost accountant, after omission of that section 35 subsection 5, this GSTR 9 and 9C both are cumulatively termed as annual return. So annual return is not confined towards GSTR 9 only. Now, whenever we do talk about annual return technically, not in a layman sense, technically that means annual return comprises of both of the aspects, that is GSTR 9 and 9C. So when we do discuss about applicability and looking the provision, we'll have to bifurcate this discussion in two parts, GSTR 9 and 9C. So GSTR 9 is applicable when the aggregate turnover of the financial year 22-23 exceeding rupees 2 crore. And GSTR 9C is applicable when your aggregate turnover exceeds rupees 5 crore for the financial year 22-23. So this is the basic framework. I am not going into that much. Due date, we all know that GSTR 9 and 9C is actually given the due date, that is 31st December of next financial year. In the first 3 financial years, the dates were extended, but now the date is fixed for us, that is 31st December 2023. So we have very few days left for the preparation of this. And when we do talk about due date, we have to discuss the late fees and penalty provisions, which is required to be pondered upon very keenly. As we all know that the late fees aspect is being dealt with by section 44 subsection 2 for the purpose of annual return. which says that 200 rupee per day or 0.5% of the turnover in state, whichever is higher, is the penalty amount. This is the point which is there from 1st of July 2017 itself. So there is no amendment in this, but the provision there has been a notification giving the relaxation from the annual return perspective, which is applicable from 2020-23 itself. So now it has been relaxed. Okay, earlier we were having the late fees, which was being governed by section itself, but now there has been a relaxation, and the relaxation has been given wide notification. The screen is there before you. Everything is so clear and cut. It says that whenever the aggregate turnover of the financial, if the aggregate turnover of the financial year does not exceed rupees 5 crore, in that case 50 rupee per day and 0.02% under CGST and 0.02% SGST of the turnover. So turnover, that means that means 0.04% of the turnover and is the maximum limit. So 50 rupee per day, which is subject to the maximum cap of 0.04% of turnover. Likewise, if your turnover is exceeding 5 crore but not exceeding rupees 20 crore, then in that case it is 100 rupee per day, subject to the maximum cap, which we have just discussed, that is 0.04% of the turnover. Please take care. This is not the aggregate turnover. Maximum limit of the late fees is based on the turnover. And whenever we do talk about turnover means the turnover in a state here, right? So here it is explicitly written that it is, though the slab is being decided by the aggregate turnover. It is on the basis of the aggregate turnover, but the late fees, the maximum cap of the late fees is being determined based on turnover. So this is also required to be taken care of. And when the aggregate turnover of a registered person exceeding rupees 20 crore, there is no relaxation. So it means it is very clear that it will be governed by section 47 subsection 2 only, which was the earlier one. So the position is same for the financial year 2022-23. In case if your aggregate turnover exceeds rupees 20 crore, there is no relaxation for the large player. And at the same point of time, we have to take care that by Finance Act 2023, it has been stipulated that annual return cannot be furnished after 3 years from the due date. So this is the amendment which has been made effective from 1st of October 2023, and it means in case if your 17-18 annual return has not been furnished, the 3 years have been, so from 3 years from the due date has already been expired. So if it is so, you cannot file GSTR 9 and 9C for the financial year 17-18 if it is so, right? It is just to give an. So of course the amendment is made effective from 1st of October 2023, but this is always relevant for all of the previous annual returns as well. So this is also an important implication. Now I would like to draw your attention on the optional table, which is always discussed. Firstly, let me tell you that there is no change as such so far as optional and mandatory tables are concerned. Please take care that GSTR 9 and 9C is compulsory based on the aggregate turnover of the registered person. Very first point. At the same point of time, if government wants to provide the relaxation in furnishing the particular table, they have to come up with the notification, and the notification has been prescribed. The notification has been issued by the government, through which those flexibilities which have been given in the previous year is also continued in the same line. Just for the sake of brevity, I have mentioned the optional table numbers over here, and we have divided it in from the perspective of outward supplies and ITC and other aspects. This table 5A to 5H, table 12 and table 13 are exempted whenever we talk about GSTR 9 from outward supplies perspective. And in GSTR 9C, table 14 is table 14 is also given the relaxation. From ITC perspective, in GSTR 9, table 7A to 7E and table 18. So table 7, you know that it talks about reversal of the credit, and table 18 is for HSN for inward supply. That means HSN for outward supplies as usual, which was mandatory in the previous year, is also continued here. There is no relaxation on this, not in the previous year, not in the current financial year, that is financial year 2023. There has been a relaxation in table 15 and 16 also, which I am not, detailing it right now. These are just for the reference purpose. Everyone can refer these tables and can go through that. What is optional, what is not the optional, because this is not much technical aspect, so I am not going through in the details. Now the very, very important aspect is about the reversal and reclaim of the credit in perspective of Rule 37A. Okay, why I'm talking about Rule 37A? Because this has been made effective from 26th of December 2022 itself. Right, so this was not there for the financial year 21-22. This has been made effective in the mid of the financial year 22-23, and that is why it is relevant to discuss Rule 37 over here. I hope you all are being addressed properly in the session. If there is any gap in this, and if you want to discuss anything which is at most relevant, please free feel to ask the queries. Now we are going into the nitty-gritties of this. We all know that when the Rule 37A is coming into the picture, yes, of course, we had Rule 37 for 180 days compliance, but now we have another one, Rule 37A, which has been made effective from 26th of December 2022, which says that in case if your supplier has not furnished the return, that is GSTR 3B, he has furnished the return, he has furnished GSTR 1 or IFF. So he has furnished the statement of outward supply in GSTR 1 or by way of invoice furnishing facility. And it has declared the particular debit note or invoice in that. Meaning thereby is, the credit must have been flow, input tax component must have been flown to GSTR 2B also. And in case if you have taken the credit, but supplier has not furnished the GSTR 3B of the corresponding tax period, in that case, law says that if it is not furnished on or before 30th September of the next financial year, in that case, the recipient will have to reverse the credit. Please take care. For financial year 22-23, if your supplier has supplied you, that means B2B supplies, it has shown the particular invoice or debit note in GSTR 1 or IFF, but the supplier has not furnished GSTR 3B, means if supplier has not paid the tax, in that case, Rule 37A requires you to reverse the credit. Now, what is the timeline? You have to check whether the supplier has furnished the return on or before 30th September 2023, right? We are talking about financial year 22-23, so I am very much precise on it. So if on or before September 2023, if supplier has not furnished GSTR 3B, law requires you, that means recipient, to reverse the credit on or before 30th November 2020. So the point is that if you are furnishing GSTR 9 and 9C, please make sure that supplier's status is also being taken care of so far as furnishing GSTR 3B is concerned. Consider a case where 30th September, on or before 30th September, GSTR 3B has not been furnished by the supplier. If it is not furnished, what you have to do? Law is asking you to reverse the credit by way of GSTR 3B itself. Rule 37A does not mention you to reverse by way of DRC 03. This is a very particular requirement. And that you have to reverse on or before 30th November 2023. In case if you do not reverse the same on or before 30th November, you are liable to pay the interest as per section 50. Now, the point which is required to be addressed here is that for financial year 22-23, the credit is you have taken the credit for the purchases or inward supplies relating to 22-23. All right, and 22-23, right? Now फाइनेंशियल ईयर 22-23 के लिए आपने क्रेडिट लिया है एंड नाउ यू हैव नॉट स्टिल बट यू हैव नॉट रिवर्स द सेम even though supplier has not furnished GSTR 3B. So what is the status? The point is, so what is the status? Rule 37A says that please reverse the credit by way of GSTR 3B. ठीक है, अब मान लीजिए कि आपने GSTR 3B में अपना क्रेडिट रिवर्स भी कर दिया है. So what will be the implication so far as GSTR 9 is concerned? Law is saying that उसका रिटर्न उसका क्रेडिट आपको रिवर्स करना है, बट क्वेश्चन हमारे सामने ये है कि वेदर दिस implication of reversal shall also be shown in GSTR 9 of financial year 22-23. The credit has been reversed in the year of 2023-24, of course, by virtue of this law. But the question is whether that reversal which has been made in 2023-24 due to 37A will also impact GSTR 9 and 9C of financial year 22-23. In my view, it is required to be shown in GSTR 9 because the credit belongs to 22-23. Okay, it may be debated, but it seems that this credit is required to be shown in GSTR 9 of financial year 22-23. And law further says that it is required to be reclaimed it may be reclaimed as and when the supplier furnishes the GSTR 3B. So whenever, say in December, GSTR 3B has been furnished by the supplier, you may reclaim the credit in GSTR 3B. Okay, and of course, you all know that what are the relevant table, that is table 4A5 is the table where you can reclaim the credit. Of course, in that particular month, that particular credit will not be shown in GSTR 2B because GSTR 1 has already been furnished by the supplier. So in that case, the mismatch will be there and you'll have to prepare the reconciliation accordingly. And it is quite expected that, you will get the notice by the department in ASMT 10 or DRC 01 in whatever proceeding they start. If they start with section 73 or 74, or they start with section 61. Okay, so I'm not again going into the nitty-gritties of invoking all these provisions, but yes, it is quite expected because there will be a mismatch, and then the department may ask you to furnish the explanation in times to come. So 37A is going to bring another sort of litigation in times to come. You'll have to explain it, and then accordingly the things can be concluded. Now I'm discussing about, I will take care of your queries. I'm not discussing right now.
And here just I interrupt. Here one question arises: how we come to know that our supplier is not filed the GSTR 3?
So that can be known from GST portal itself. You have to, of course, this is again a big exercise, and you'll have to check the status of every single supplier, that whether the GSTR 3B has been furnished by the supplier.
I think GSTR 2, there is one column which just explains this situation, whether the supplier has furnished the GSTR 3B, yes or no.
Yes.
So you have to pick that yes and correlate with the 2B.
Yes. So that is again the next exercise which one has to perform. So far as the compliance of Rule 37 is concerned.
And another view is that the compliance of section 16 subsection 2 subsection C. Because section 16 subsection C says that your supplier has furnished the return. You have to pay the GST as well as value of the goods and services, and your supplier is paid the tax and furnished the return.
Of course, that has to be done, and section 59 is also there, sir. which is talking about the furnishing of the return on the self-assessment basis. Yes. So now there is another point of discussion based on table 8A, which is a bone of contention, I would say, for the purpose of filing the GSTR 9. So I would request Saxena sir to discuss at the length on the same.
Yeah. Basically, the department used this table in the litigative manner. If we see the history of issuing of the show cause notices for financial year 17-18, if you see, they used as a weapon this table. What they did is they simply draw the difference, which is shown in table 8A, 8D, 8A minus 8B, and issue the show cause notices. Your supplier not furnishes the return of GSTR 1, and as well as they are not paid the taxes. So, question here arises, how we just cope with this situation to avoid the future notices for the financial year 2022-23. So, because in table 8A, some tables are optional and some tables are mandatory. So you have to require to fill all the basically particulars or data, whatever required. So, but we can take a shelter because if we refer the press release dated 18th October 2018, which clearly clarified that the furnishing of detail of GSTR 1 by the supplier and the facility to view the same in the GSTR 2A is in the nature of taxpayer facilitation and does not impact the right of the recipient to avail the ITC on the basis of the self-assessment. So meaning thereby, if you suppose receive the notices from the department based on the table 8 that your supplier is not furnishing the return or your supplier is not paid the taxes and not filed the returns, you can very well take the shelter of this press release 18th October 2018. And another, they have further clarified that the government undertakes the practical difficulty of the present return system and hence wide circular. If you refer the circular number 59/33/2018 dated 4/9/2018, this basically circular relate to the refund claim and they allow the taxpayer to claim a refund of GST by furnishing the hard copy of bill even if they do not appear in the GSTR 2A. So they clarify that. So here the question arises, another press release dated 3rd July 2019, which clearly says that it is the mere an information that government needs this table for the settlement purpose, for settlement of the dues between the central and state. Another, if we see the basically requirement of that particular, if you see the one Kerala High Court judgment sent Joseph T. Company, Paramount Envire Engineering versus State Tax Officer 2021. So that judgment also pronounced that the ITC cannot be denied only on the ground that the transaction is not merely appearing in the GSTR 2A. And recently on yesterday, we will see the dismissal of the SLP by the Supreme Court in the Suncraft case. So we can conclude that the table 8 is not the basically final criteria to determine the liability whether, because we have another the circular 183 and 193, which will taken care if the supplier, whatever the region supplier is not in position to furnish the GSTR 1 and that doesn't mean the denial of the credit basically. Over to you.
So, sir, the question which people generally ask that in case where, when the GSTR 2B is in the picture, as per Rule 60, if we read Section 38 to be read with Rule 60, GSTR 2B has been given the recognition now, right? So, and GST and Table 8A, on the other hand, is being, given a number based on your 2A status, right? So what is the relevance, when at the one hand, they are asking you to take the credit on the basis of 2B, and at the second hand in GSTR 9, which is very, very important for any assessment purpose, and they are asking you to provide the details and reconciliation based on 2A.
Basically, there is a two technical difficulty. When you finalize your GSTR 9, there is a one figure of GSTR table 8. when you file the GSTR 9, there is some different figure for 8A, which is updated in the gap, in between the gap. And you have to prepare the one reconciliation between the GSTR 2B and 2A. So that's another challenge for the taxpayers. So I think this is the basically harsh because after implementing the circular 170, where they talk about only for the GSTR 2B, and 2A is no more relevance. So the continuing the 2A in table 8A is, I think, the harassment one kind of for the assessment.
Because I see that annual return is being taken as a basis for the purpose of assessment and all, and to be has been given a place, there's no meaning to ask for the reconciliation. And you see that section 61 notices have been issued, or DRC or section 73 or 74 has been issued for the purpose of on the basis of the difference being shown in table 8D, right? So I'm not able to understand, for what purpose, they are asking you to furnish table 8.
I think one other problem we just face it is just if you see the figure of table 8A, which is the net figure of ITC, because it's auto-populated through the GSTR 2A. And if you see the table 6B and table 6H, which reflected in table 8B, which is the gross part. So this is another challenge to compare the net figure or in between the gross figure.
One of the attendees of this session has asked a query that please discuss the manner of reporting. Sir, no, the name is same, right? So my name has been written over here. Mr. Vivek, if you could please explain your query before Saxena sir, so that he will be able to answer it. Better is if you could ask this query.
You can do it at the end of this session.
No, because I think
So
this is
I think the query is please discuss the manner of reporting of figure ITC in table 6 and 7 of GSTR 9, considering the new 3B format and circular number 170. Do we have to match table 6 with the table 4A of 3B and table 7 with the table 4B of the GSTR 3B? Basically, if you bifurcate the implementation of circular 170, right, the period is from the April to July actually, and from 1st August the circular 170 was introduced. So you have to furnish the information basically in a manner, in such a manner of similar to when you have filed the 3B basically, because whatever you file in the 3B, you cannot deviate while filing the GSTR 9. So you cannot change the reporting pattern, because what is the GSTR 9? It is the aggregation and compilation of GSTR 3B. If you try to just change the pattern of the disclosure, that's create the problem. You will receive the notices via GSTR 9 versus GSTR 3B or GSTR 9 versus GSTR 1. So you have to file in a manner, whatever you disclose in the GSTR 3B, you similar pattern, you have to disclose that information in GSTR 9.
And that's another interesting query which has been asked by CA Swapnil Jainji. During financial year 22-23, after introduction of 3B format, in the initial month, the credit note was being shown in other reversal, whereas in other months, it was shown in all other ITC. So he's asking that first, in the first phase, we were filing it on the gross basis, and then we started to have to practice on the net basis. So how to report the same in GSTR 9? I think answer is same. So you will not change your practice, right? Because the moment you change your practice, of course, as sir has mentioned that there will be two set of information with the department. One is GSTR 3B and one is GSTR 9, and they will ask you to explain that what has happened in GSTR 3B and what has happened in GSTR 9. So it is a moderate and better answer in my understanding that you do not be deviated whatever the pattern you have followed, which you have followed in GSTR 3B. It is better to go by that in GSTR 9 also. I hope your queries are answered. So shall we go further, right? Now few queries which we have covered for the purpose of discussion. This is, we have already, crossed the time. So I think we have very short span of time, 5 to 10 minutes we can take. 6 past 4. We have 25 minutes. Sorry. So now the case is, when the GSTR 9 and 9C contains the reporting of data of the relevant financial year, is there any exception? Because as Saxena sir has also mentioned that this is a summarization of the details which you have furnished in the returns basically, or of course, if you have omitted something, then in that case, it is also required to be reported. But the point here is whether GSTR 99C contains the reporting of the relevant financial year data. Means if you are talking about 22-23, and if something is there of 22-22, 21-22, whether it is also required to be reported. So I am not talking about spillover transactions. 22-21-22 का था और 22-23 के GSTR 3B में दिखा दिया. Of course, that is there. But apart from this, an interesting point is relating to the reverse charge transaction. As you can, see the press release dated 3rd of July 2019, it says that, many taxpayers have requested for the clarification on the appropriate column or table in which the tax was to be paid on RCM basis for 17-18, but the same was paid in 18-19. Now this press release says that please do furnish that particular information in annual return of 18-19 on, and do not furnish. So 17-18 का detail है, लेकिन वो 18-19 में जाएगा. So this is an important exception which we have to take care of. This is the requirement of the press release. Everything is cannot be taken as a in black and white, but I would request all of you please take care of whatever has been stated. In times to come, if something is litigated कि नहीं हमने अगर उसको 17-18 की चीज को 17-18 में डाल दिया ये कह के कि हमने नेक्स्ट फाइनेंशियल ईयर में उसको पे किया है एंड तो हो सकता है कि हम आगे जाके हमको लिटिगेशन फेस करना पड़े. सो इट इज बेटर दैट whatever the requirement is there, please try to make it possible by furnishing the compliances. So this is an exception which we have to take care very particularly. Now another question which is again a point of point to ponder, that people are not talking about GSTR 9A these days. Saxena sir, I would also like to draw your attention on this point, that people are still not discussing about GSTR 9A, right? Everywhere the GSTR 9 is being discussed. So the question arises whether GSTR 9 is applicable or not. You may also surprise that why this question has been covered here. The reason is because the reason of surprise is that the applicability of GSTR 9 is only and only when the applicability of annual return is only when the aggregate turnover crosses the threshold limit, that is aggregate turnover of 2 crore. Now, when we do talk about GSTR 9A, that is the annual return for the composition scheme. And you all know that composition scheme cannot be opted or continued when the aggregate turnover crosses the threshold limit of the composition scheme, that is 75 lakh or 1.5 crore as per the case, right? So you'll see that, sir, if the annual return is going to be applicable on exceeding the threshold limit, of course 9A का तो कोई सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता क्योंकि वो composition scheme में रहेगा नहीं. But the point is, if in the mid of the financial year, if the aggregate turnover has exceeded the threshold limit, and by virtue of the requirement of section 10 of the CGST Act or respective state GST Act, that is the governing section of composition scheme, which says that आपका aggregate turnover cross होते ही आपको इससे बाहर निकलना है और आपको main stream पे जाना है, that is regular scheme. So जब आप GSTR 9A मतलब आप composition scheme से बाहर जाएंगे and you'll have to live in the main stream, in that case 1.5 CR भी क्रॉस हो गया और मान लीजिए 2 crore भी क्रॉस हो गया इन द सेम फाइनेंशियल, So as per my view, and if you read the requirement of section 44 rule 80, right, with rule 80, you'll come to know it is very explicit requirement कि 9A भी applicable है ऐसी केस में कि वो कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम से रेगुलर में गया और रेगुलर में भी उसने 2 crore क्रॉस कर दिया, तो ऐसे केस में उसको 9A भी एप्लीकेबल है और 9 भी एप्लीकेबल है. Okay, so this is also a point which is required to be taken care of. The point here is GST portal खुद 9 में दिखाता है कि नहीं दिखाता. This is the point. And to my knowledge, GSTR 9 is not available there.
I think the substitute is GSTR.
Yes. तो ऐसे केस में नहीं, GSTR 4 is there, which is required to be furnished annually, right? And that is section 39 return. GSTR 9 is the return of section 44, right? So 44 and rule 80 do require you to furnish GSTR 9. Now the point is कि ऐसे केस में मैं जब से मान लीजिए 4 months मैंने कॉम्पोजिशन में अपना निकाला है और 8 months रिमेनिंग 8 months में मैं रेगुलर में था, तो अब पॉइंट ये आता है कि मैं अपना GSTR 9 कैसे फाइल करूंगा व्हेन दे आर नॉट गिविंग मी द फैसिलिटी ऑफ फर्निशिंग GSTR 9. So this is also an interesting point, which is required to be addressed by the lawmakers. Now the next point is I have not furnished 9 and 9C of 17-18 till now. I think we have already covered this. Could I furnish now? तो 3 years निकलने due date from the due date of एनुअल रिटर्न से 3 साल के अंदर अगर आपने आपको मतलब 3 साल का ही आपको वहाँ पर पीरियड अलाउड है इफ यू वांट टू फर्निश, एंड दिस इज द रिसेंट अमेंडमेंट मेड इफेक्टिव बाय फाइनेंस एक्ट 2023. Now the case again an interesting case that Mr. Ram has earned 2 types of income: interest from FD, that is 1.9 CR, and rental income from residential houses 12 lakh. So if you aggregate it or if you total it, it comes to 2 crore 2 lakh rupees. The question is whether GSTR 9 is applicable. So Mr. Ram is an individual person and interest from FD is 1.9 CR and rental income from the residential houses 12. The question arises here is that whether in such a case the requirement is there to furnish GSTR 9 or 9 CR. Okay, it's a very isolated example because कई बार ये होता है कि लोग इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न भरते हैं तो उनको पता चलता है कि इतना कुछ इनका इनकम था एंड देन दे डू पॉन्डर अपॉन इट कि वेदर दे डू हैव द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ फर्निशिंग द एनुअल रिटर्न्स. पहला क्वेश्चन तो यहाँ पर ये भी आता है कि वेदर ही हैज टेकन द रजिस्ट्रेशन और नॉट. वो सब चीजें भी डेफिनेटली डिस्कस करना चाहिए. When we do talk about section 22, which talks about the compulsory the requirement of registration 2022, it says that whenever the aggregate turnover crosses the threshold limit, right? I'm not reading the wordings of this in the state from where you make the taxable supply and all, right? So the point is that whether there is a supply or not, because they are section 22 subsection 1 talks about when the aggregate turnover crosses the threshold. And when you read the definition of aggregate turnover as stipulated in section 2 clause 6 of Central GST Act, it says that aggregate turnover means an aggregate of taxable supply and exempt supply and blah blah blah. So there has to be a supply first, and for the supply you have to check section 7 of Central GST Act, right? And Central GST Act says that for being a supply, the activity has to be in the course of business or in furtherance of business, and the definition of business has been given under section 292(17) of Central GST Act, right? So the question is whether the interest from FD should be regarded as business nature or rental income from residential house to be regarded as a business nature. Why we have covered this query? Because with the background, and I would like to draw your kind attention on the provision, right? And this is the exemption. This is the exemption notification 12/2017 Central Tax Rate, right? It says that services by way of renting of residential dwelling for use as residence is exempted, and with an exception that except where the residential dwelling is rented to a registered person. You all know when this development came into the picture, 18th of July 2022, को ये exception cover हुआ. So it says that if you are renting the residential dwelling for the purpose of use as residence, it is exempted. only in a case when it is given to a registered person, it will be taxable. And you all know, 513/2017 central tax rate, they have covered it into the reverse charge mechanism, right? अब ये कहने के बाद में उन्होंने फिर एक एक्सप्लेनेशन डाला है, that is with effect from 1st of January 2013, saying that for the purpose of exemption under this entry shall cover the services by way of renting of residential dwelling to the registered person, where the registered person is proprietor of a proprietorship concern, means the recipient of the service, and rents the residential dwelling in his personal capacity for use as his residence person, and such on his own account and not that of proprietorship. So क्वेश्चन ये है कि ऐसे केस में जहां आप अपनी रेजिडेंशियल प्रॉपर्टी को रेंटल पर दे रहे हो, तो ऐसे केस में क्या वो सप्लाई भी होगा जिस पर हम एग्जम्पशन की बात कर रहे हैं? सी, फर्स्टली one has to see the exact definition or scope of the supply. One has to check the scope of the supply as stipulated under section 7 of central GST. Merely by saying कि exemption entry में आ गया है तो उससे हम क्या उसको सप्लाई बोल सकते हैं? कि सीधा उन्होंने बोल दिया कि आपने अगर घर को किराए पर दिया है और रहने के लिए, रिहायशी घर को रिहायशी पर्पस के लिए किराए पर दिया है, एंड दैट इज एग्जम्प्टेड, कैन आई से दैट क्योंकि एग्जम्पशन एंट्री में आ गया इसीलिए सप्लाई? I believe as per the law it is no, because for being exempt supply it has to be the supply first, and if it is not a supply, there is no question of applicability of exemption here, right? So this point is again going to be debated in times to come कि exemption में आया है, क्योंकि exemption में आने के फिर दूसरे consequences भी हैं, no? तो taxable supply भी और exempted भी है. In that case, of course you all know कि फिर वो 17 to 73 rule 42 43 common period reversal, ये सारे scenario वो second implication है. But the point is कि क्या ऐसे केस में वो supply भी है या नहीं है? अगर वो supply है तो डेफिनेटली वो एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर का पार्ट बनेगा, और सप्लाई नहीं है तो वो टर्नओवर का पार्ट नहीं बनेगा. एंड बिलीव मी, इन लीगलिटी नथिंग, I cannot conclude by seeing anything. I can just give my view that it is not a supply, and if it is not a supply, there is no question of saying it is to be exempted supply, right? क्योंकि एक एग्जाम सप्लाई भी आपके एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर को थ्रेशोल्ड से बाहर निकाल के ले जा सकता है, और वंस द एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर इज क्रॉस, तो उसके बेसिस पे कई सारी दूसरी चीजें आपके साथ में चलती है, लाइक रजिस्ट्रेशन रिक्वायरमेंट, राइट? फिर आपका एचएसएन का रिक्वायरमेंट, एंड देन कॉमन पीरियड, ऑफकोर्स वो टर्नओवर का पार्ट बनेगा तो कॉमन पीरियड रिवर्सल, जीएसटीआर 9(9)(c) का, ऐसे कई सारे इम्प्लीकेशंस फिर साथ में चालू हो जाए. सो many times it is expected that the speaker has to conclude it, right? But if the things itself are being litigated, speaker is duty bound to say that it is litigated, it's my personal view, and one has to take the call as per the own discretion, right? So with saying this, I am proceeding for the further things. GSTR 9, another issue is GSTR 9 contains the reporting of data of outward supplies. The activity which is not a supply is required to be furnished, which is not a supply is not to be furnished in GSTR 1 and 1, 3B and 9. Is this true? So whatever is not a supply, generally we see that the same is not furnished in GSTR 1 and 3B, right? GSTR 1 is nothing but the statement of outward supply. This has been titled like this. Of course, the title does not govern the law. Title does not construe the interpretation. But of course, when we read section 37, subsection 1 itself, it uses the phrase statement of outward supplies. So the point is, if something is not a supply, it is not furnished in GSTR 1. It is also not furnished in 3B. The question is, the thing which is not the activity which is not a supply, whether it is reported in GSTR 9, I would say yes. There is an exception to this, and that is nothing but a table, and table 5F, which says that no supply is also required to be included in table 5. So it's again a very interesting aspect. वो बोलते हैं table 5, तो मतलब ये है कि आप say for an example, if you are the builder and 2/3, 1/3 computation is being performed, 1/3 represents the part of 1/3 represents the land or undivided share of land. This is also, though it is excluded from the scope of supply because of the entry number 5 of Schedule 3, but GSTR 9 requires you to furnish the same still. So even though the same is not required to be furnished in GSTR 1 and 3B, but they require you to furnish in GSTR 9. So please take care of this particular information. This is already covered now. This issue I have come across many of times because chartered accountants, the notices are being issued to chartered accountants also, right? So a chartered accountant is preparing the books as per the cash basis when they do file the returns as per income tax law. But in GST law, there is a concept of time of supply. So at one hand, they are preparing or furnishing the returns of income tax as per the cash basis, and in GSTR 9 they do follow the requirement of section 13, that is time of supply. So time of supply says that in case of services as per section 13 subsection 2 forward charge mechanism, that date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, is the time of supply. Now what happens is, in income tax, what happens is you raise the invoice to the client, but the client, I say in the month of March, right? But the same has been paid in the month of say June, right? So March 2023 में आपने invoice issue किया है and the amount has been received by you in June 2020. So the same is not covered in the income tax computation, but the same is covered in GST because the invoice has been issued. So the earlier date is triggering the time of supply. So there is a difference. If you check it or if you reconcile it with the Income Tax Act, so please take care of all these reconciliation as the same is the requirement, right? ITC has been written off in the books but not reversed in GSTR 3B and 9. What can be the consequence? Right? So what happens? People are taking the benefits of these practices. They are writing off the credit in the books. They are writing off, and they are writing off. They have written off. They have taken the benefit in the income tax also because that is the allowed expenditure. But in GSTR 3B, they do not reverse it. Furthermore, when they do prepare GSTR 9, they do not go for the additional reversal and they do not reverse in table 7, and the implication has not been given in table 9 of GSTR 9, right? So the point is, what is next? So in case if department comes to know about these practices, it may have the serious implications because you are taking the benefits from and you are having the laddus in both of your hands, right? तो ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है. ऐसा करने पर फिर you all know that what could be the things in GST, फिर वो fraudulent and malpractices को लेकर proceeding start कर सकते हैं. So please be aware of it. Yes, these may be acquainted जब भी आप GST 9 से प्रिपेयर करते हैं और ITC reconciliation बनाते हैं बुक्स और GSTR 3B में, तो वहाँ ये चीजें सामने आती हैं. बट व्हाट हैपेंस जब GSTR 9C बनाते ही नहीं है पहली चीज, राइट? एंड डिपार्टमेंट ने अभी भी 9C की reconciliation ITC reconciliation पर टू माय नॉलेज उतना काम नहीं किया है या वो उतना चीजों को उतना देख नहीं पा रहे हैं, लेकिन ये प्रैक्टिसेस कई जगह चल रही है, राइट? And in case where 9C is not applicable, 9 is applicable. So department is not taking the data and as per data of the reconciliation between books and CD. So in such cases, the things are being omitted और उनके सामने वो आ नहीं रही है, लेकिन ऐसा ठीक नहीं है. So being a consultant, we have to guide the clients properly. I am a GTA and I shifted from RCM to FCM on 18th of July. In what manner I should prepare the 9 and 9C? You all know कि to the extent which जिसके लिए मैं अगर RCM में कवर था तो RCM के हिसाब से आउटवर्ड सप्लाईज दिखानी है GSTR 1 एंड GSTR 3B में, और जिस हिसाब से मुझे फॉरवर्ड चार्ज मैकेनिज्म एप्लीकेबल होता है उसी तरीके से मुझे उसको फॉलो करना है. सो देयर इज नो nothing new, but yes, you may come across some scenarios where the entity is same, business nature is same, but there is a shifting from RCM to FCM. You need not be aware, you need not be bothered of it. आपको जो एक्चुअल लॉ है उसी रिक्वायरमेंट से आपको उसको फॉलो करना है, राइट. तो आपको दोनों ही सिनेरियो टेबल 4 और 5 में ऐसे देखने को मिलेंगे. आउटवर्ड सप्लाई सब्जेक्ट टू आरसीएम, आउटवर्ड सप्लाई सब्जेक्ट टू एफसीएम. तो प्लीज टेक केयर ऑफ इट. I think this is also a point which is to be taken into consideration about the responsibility of professional in furnishing GSTR 9 and 9C. Whenever we are performing any professional assignment, let me tell you that CA Act covers all of these things. Even though these are being covered specifically by way of particular standard or not, everything has been everything has been so covered by way of चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट एक्ट. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि उसके लिए कोई स्पेसिफिक स्टैंडर्ड नहीं आया तो हमारे ऊपर कुछ भी एप्लीकेबिलिटी नहीं. सो देर इज अ प्रोफेशनल मिसकंडक्ट as stipulated in the first schedule and the second schedule of CA Act. So please be aware of it. And if there is a compilation assignment of GSTR 9 and 9C, you may please refer standard on related services, that is 4400. So that you may cover, and accordingly you have to engage into the assignment. You have to engage yourself into the assignment by way of keeping care of engagement letter and your documentation and your reporting part. So this we have also covered in our book, particularly about these requirements. So with this, I conclude my session. If you have any queries, please let us know. So I've been asked to explain case study. Sir. So the queries may, please raise the query. I would also request Saxena sir to please address this query. My output tax liability is negative due to issuance of the credit note.
Yeah.
So the output tax liability is negative. I have supplied it in financial year 21-22 and my liability was 10 crore. Credit note I have issued in 22-23 and that was 4 crore. और जबकि 22-23 का एक्सक्लूसिवली जो सेल है that is 2 crore. How should it impact in preparing GSTR? So the point is, पहले तो आपको एग्जैक्टली यही देखना है कि वो क्रेडिट नोट रेज कब किया है, राइट. द सेम हैज बीन रेज्ड इन फाइनेंशियल ईयर 22-23. सो इट इज अफेक्टिंग द एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर एज सच इन द सेम फाइनेंशियल ईयर ओनली. 22-23 का ही एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर वहां पे अफेक्टेड होगा. So 2 crore is the actual supply and 4 crore is the credit note. So it is a basically negative turnover. But the point is, how should it impact in preparing 9M, right? But the question is that your aggregate turnover is negative turnover. So whether the annual return is applicable in such a case, in my humble view, if we go with the literal interpretation, it does not exceed the aggregate turnover and thereby GSTR 9 and 9C itself is not applicable. So it's again another sort of query, uh, and a very unique type of query which we have tried to answer. If queries do have any particular query, they may ask the question, by unmuting themselves. So we can take the query for 2 to 3 minutes, and because we have the further engagements, and Taxmann team will also have to engage themselves for the next session. So the other speakers are also the speakers for the next session are also waiting for this. I think there is no query. So shall we conclude this session, sir? So if RCM liability of 2022-23 paid in 23-24, how to show? You have to show in the annual return of 23-24 only. You do not have to show the same in 22-23 return, please. That is what written in the press release, which I have shown 3rd of July 2019. So this was the very first issue. Thank you.